Welcome to the Detroit Lions podcast. I'm your host, Show Chap. We're going to be talking about the Detroit Lions because obviously the news of the day is Frank Ragnow has retired from football at the age of 29, and a lot of us saw it coming. When you saw all the injuries that Frank was dealing with, he had a fractured throat a couple years ago. He had a torn pec last year, and he played through it. He gutted through it. He had a fractured foot one year. Like this guy was the epitome of toughness, and through 2,000 snaps this guy is only allowed 6 sacks. He's one of the constant pros, and it's gonna be hard to replace a guy like Frank Ragnow. And I think the Lions they assumed this could be very, very problematic, but they assumed that he would come back for another year. I assume that they thought he was gonna come back for another year. Now they're at the point where they're searching for who could be the next center. And they got OTAs tomorrow. It's going to be opening up. Obviously, Tate Ratledge was taking a majority of the snaps at center, and we know that Graham Glasgow has a lot of experience at center in terms of the way he's been able to play. He's got a lot of versatility, and Coach Campbell has alluded to that. But there is no replacing a guy like Frank Ragnow. There's just no replacing a guy like Frank Ragnow. And you can go out there tomorrow and try to get the next guy. But the reality of the situation is there's no one in free agency that is like Ragnow. And there is no one in your locker room like Ragnow. And you can hope that Tate Ratledge grows into a player that could be one of the best centers in the NFL. And you could hope that Miles Frazier, or Chris Mahogany, or Glasgow has another great year, and you could just move them along. Or Sorsdal was taking snaps at center. But the reality of the situation is this: we know the Lions are going to take a step back at the center position. There's just no doubt about it. And when you look at what Frank Ragnow has done through his injury-riddled seasons, here's what he's done. He was number one run blocking center in 2024. In 2023, he was number one. In 2022, he was number 5. He was graded the number 2 overall center in 2024, number 1 in 2023, and number 5 in overall center in 2022. Obviously helped anchor the Lions turnaround, like what Warren Sharp says. And, obviously injuries played a factor into where Ragnow is. But look, there's no doubt this is going to be a big loss for the Lions. And you hope that you could, bring Tate Ratledge along. But when you look at the schedule, there is no easing him into the games. You know what I'm saying? It's a very tough schedule. So they're gonna have to go in the center position, maybe the free agency market, maybe a trade somewhere. But right now, they're kind of in a position of limbo where you might have to count on a rookie, you might have to count on an overseas vet and Graham Glasgow, and it's going to be tough. But here's what Frank Ragnow said on Instagram when he announced his retirement. These past couple of months have been very trying as I've been coming to the realization that my football journey is ending and I'm officially retiring from the NFL. I tried to convince myself that I'm feeling good and I'm not. And it's time to prioritize my health and my family's future. I have given the team everything I have, and I thought about I had more to give, but the reality is I simply don't. I'd have to listen to my body, and this has been one of the hardest decisions of my life. The Lions organization has been absolutely incredible throughout the process, and I cannot emphasize this enough how grateful I am for this team and all the fans. It was absolute honor going to battle for you all. Look, there's a lot of people that there's going to be a lot of doom and gloom with Frank Ragnow choosing to retire. And I don't fault those people because when you think about Frank Ragnow retiring, it's a brutal blow. It's a brutal blow to a franchise that is trending in the right direction. Obviously last year was an injury riddled year on defense, and you went to the playoffs and you just didn't have it enough. And you go in the mainstay of this whole Detroit Lions team has been the offensive line. Now, the good thing about this offensive line is you do keep Penei Sewell. You did draft Tate Ratledge, Miles Frazier, and Christian Mahogany. They could be really good. But the separate part to this is, Hank Fraley stayed. If Hank Fraley left for Chicago, I'd be feeling a whole lot worse. Because let's remember one thing: when Coyote Ashika was thrown into a game against the Buffalo Bills on a Thanksgiving short week, where he had to go against Ed Oliver of all people as a rookie undrafted free agent. He was very well versed in it, and he did a damn good job being it was his first start, being he was an undrafted free agent, being he was going against a Pro Bowler defensive tackle in Ed Oliver. And, you know, you want to have Frank here, but the reality of the situation is you don't. And, Hank Fraley is going to have to put something together. And he is one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL. So I'm not feeling like he's not going to be able to do anything. I think Hank Fraley is he's gonna really find the next guy. But how long does that take? Because when you look at this schedule, it's not a it's not an easy schedule. You start off with the Packers, Bears, Ravens, and Browns. Those are four good defensive lines. You got the Bengals, you got the Chiefs, that's Chris Jones. You got the Buccaneers, Vita Vea. You got the Minnesota Vikings. You got the Eagles. You got the Giants, who have a great defensive line with Dexter Lawrence and Abdul Carter and Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns. You got Michael Parsons. You got the Green Bay Packers again. Great D line in LA. You go against a lot of good defensive lines here. So it will be very, very interesting to see what happens in the days ahead because do the Lions go out and sign a free agent center? Perhaps they can. Is it going to be Frank Ragnow? No. But they're trying to replace a Frank Ragnow now is you might as well be wishing upon a star because you're not going to get that guy. Frank Ragnow is he's an elite player. But last year we saw the Eagles lose Jason Kels. They go, Cam Jurgens takes over, and they go to Super Bowl win. It's not a foregone conclusion that your team is going to suck. It's not a foregone conclusion that this will be the death nail. But the Lions will have a hole to fill in the center position as well as trying to figure out who the guards are going to be because we talked on the last podcast about the guards and how that would be a position to watch. And now you look at it now, the center position is going to be one to watch. And I'll go back to what Hank Fraley said um, with the competition. Trying to pull it up. Oh man, I don't know where it went. But we saw, Hank Fraley talk about over here. He says, "I know this, and I've always learned it from my father, coaching me in the little leagues, all the way up through going to high school to college, and then having an opportunity to play at this level. Competition brings out the best of you, the best of the unit." Fraley said, "It'll weed out the weak too. So the guys that can't keep up and talk it out with all our guys this year, there's a lot of opportunity for everyone." It just when you hear what Hank Fraley had to say just a week ago, did it feel like he knew something that we didn't? Maybe, but look, they have a hole to fill in Frank being gone, and you're lucky that you have a quarterback who's smart, who can he can make the calls at the line. It's even better when you have a center like Frank Ragnow and Jared Goff, you know, going off each other. But Jared Goff is a well capable quarterback to make those decisions, and I'm sure they could divvy it up to where Sewell could be making the calls, Decker could be making the calls. Whatever the case may be, that is where the Detroit Lions are going to have to go. And here, I think the Lions are doing a damn good job at redoing this offensive line. Mahogany, he's going to probably be a starter this year. Tate Ratledge might be a rookie starter at center. We'll see what happens, but this Lions team, I can tell you this right now, just based on what Frank said, based on what Hank Fraley said, it seems like this was brewing beneath the surface. And they were giving Frank as much time as he needed, but ultimately, especially with this year starting a little earlier than usual, it was probably came down to they were waiting it out, hoping for the best, hoping for the best, hoping for the best. And then when Frank Rags said, "I just can't do it." That's probably what was the difference. So the Lions have a lot to look forward to, but they have a lot to fix. And there's going to be some major questions. Not only are you losing a guy like Frank Ragnow, you lost Ben Johnson, you lost Aaron Glenn. You're going to be missing McNeil for the first 6 to 8 weeks. Maybe this is a good thing because all throughout social media, I've heard that the Detroit Lions are going to win 15, 14 games. I even heard on 97 won the ticket, and I think 97 won ticket is it's just bananas lands in terms of hatred and homerism. There's no in between. It's kind of sad, but I look at it this way. You know, it's so hard to win 15 games in the NFL. And just because you don't win 15 games this year doesn't mean it's a bad season. You know, majority of the Super Bowl champs are not 15-2. They're not 16. They're not 16-1. They're not even 14-3. It's very rare. So I think Lions fans need to take a step back. There will be some challenges this early on in the season, I assume. I would be shocked if there's not. But there's a lot of turnover. And we know that, Dan Campbell is a focal point in the offense, but the defense has a new play caller. Jared Goff has this. I'm more convinced the offense will be fine. The defense, that's going to be a work in progress. The terminology, communications, all that jazz. And then Frank Ragnow leaving obviously does hurt the offense, in my opinion. So we'll see what happens down the line, but this is what it is. And hopefully Brad Holmes can do, obviously the draft picks that he drafted this year, Tate Ratledge, Miles Frazier, Christian Mahogany the year before, they're going to be asked to play. And it's going to be interesting to see if Mr. Holmes was right once again, because a lot of people are assuming that, they take these luxury picks like Tesla and Giovanni Manu and all of that jazz, but those are you can't always pick need. You got to go after players that are going to be you think that you could develop into someone. So that's what it is. But we'll see what happens. There's obviously OTAs starting Tuesday and going into Thursday, and we'll talk about that this week on the Detroit Lions News podcast. But for right now, sad day for the Lions and sad day for the fans because you're going to be losing a player that you really didn't hope to lose in Frank Ragnow. So we'll see you next time on the JC Sports YouTube page, Detroit Lions News podcast on the JC Sports YouTube page. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.